Well, I'm going to welcome us all to this session and get things underway. We have about 90 minutes ahead of us, and we're going to use that in three parts. I'm going to spend a little while exploring the idea of community organizing, and then turn things over to Vasant, who's going to talk about advocacy related to public policy. And then we'll hold on to a piece of time at the end to be able to share and learn from all the rest of you and have a little bit of interaction if possible. So I'm going to be talking in my time about the kind of work we do when we bring people together through community organizing. I once tried to tell a joke in a Zoom meeting, by the way, and nobody laughed. So I decided then that I wasn't remotely funny, and so we'll just go straight to the session. When we often at public events take a minute to acknowledge the First Peoples whose land this is and honor the way they've cared for it, we are in one part, even in that acknowledgement, we are reminding ourselves of the power of community, that together people are more than the sum of the individual numbers. And so being able to create strong communities opens doors to a lot of other possibilities. But I want to begin with a fundamental concept that underlies work that I think we do in communities. And that's already partly up there in the first slide that reminds us, in my view, there is no such thing as the voiceless. And if we can move to the second slide, what there are people who are often ignored. Or moving to the third slide, there are people who are deliberately excluded and silenced. So community organizing is a key way to deal with that rejection of the voices of some. And what we want to remember is that in every community, amongst any group of people, there are a wide diversity of skills and resources. In every community, there's also issues that need attention. And so there's three key things that reminds us. And if you go away and don't stay for the whole session and remember nothing else, these are the core elements of community organizing, in my view. First of all, we bring people together and we build relationships. That's fundamental. Second, we develop together a vision of some preferred future. How are we going to solve a problem? Or how are we going to create something new that's needed? And third, we develop realistic and creative action plans to do something. So if we build our work around those three principles, it doesn't matter if out there they have a lot of money and power. We have the many and can work with that. So I don't ever think community work is about finding your superhero, your Batman that you can shine the beacon up on the clouds and they will come and look after the problems for you. But it's about ordinary people coming together to make social change that will result in something that's more fair, more just, especially for those that are excluded and pushed to the sides, but really in the end for all of us. And so this session is a very good fit at a conference like Ignite Now, because fundamentally community work is about human rights. And if we ignore community work, there's a price to be paid. And I'll just ask maybe to move to the next slide and share a quote with you about that price. So we don't want to let that happen. And that's why we want to learn to be good community organizers. Many of you, I'm sure, that are joining us here have had lots of valuable experiences in this work as well. And I wish a session like this really belongs in a big room where we've got flip charts and post-its and tables we can gather around and change in groups of people and do lots of sharing. Instead, you're going to just get a few minutes of listening to some of the things that I think I've kind of learned or experienced over the years. So let's move to the next slide for one key idea I want to remind us of. And that is that in community organizing, there are no cookie cutters. There's no formula that we're trying to learn and then we apply it every time to the new numbers. This isn't a math exercise. Every time, every place is unique. We're always trying to find how much structure we need in the work we do in the community. Too much structure can kill energy and slow things down. Too little, people start to feel nervous and confused and not sure what's going on. We're always trying to find what works in a given situation. The next key thing that I've learned in community organizing is that nothing is the way it is by chance. The benefits are going to some group of people to maintain the status quo, and they're not going to easily give up those benefits that they enjoy. And that's why we've got to be good at what we do. If they can keep people isolated and fearing each other, suspicious of each other, that will benefit their continued enjoying all the results of their power. So if we can go to the next slide, I want to emphasize to you that in this work, never underestimate the resistance you're going to face. And I've just listed here to remind you some of the things you've probably in your own community work seen many of these in action. When we start to try to organize as a community, they're going to deny that there's a problem. They're going to try to slow stuff to a halt with inertia. They're going to try to discredit. They're going to try to confuse the issue and bring in irrelevant material. They're going to outright lie and we're going to experience dishonesty. They're going to hide and avoid having to face us. They're going to try to delay things. They're going to try to buy us off. They're going to use counterattacks to go after us. All those things are possible as we're working to organize around an issue in a community. But the flip of the coin, I may be strong in saying to you, never underestimate the resistance you're going to face in community organizing, but also never overestimate the resistance. Hope is a powerful thing. The conviction that as a group of people together sharing a concern, we can make a difference and that things can be changed is a powerful resource that we have on our side. And then if we move to the next slide, one more fundamental of working in the community is remembering always nothing about us without us. The heart of this work is getting people together and ensuring that the people who come together are able to participate in building relationships with each other, in building networks amongst groups of people, and that the people themselves are really the whole story of community organizing. So that requires alertness. We have to be always looking for where we can find the people that we want to connect with. We need to be careful not to be too ambitious at first. We need to remember that at the start, it's who we know ourselves that we've got to work with. And that's an important thing because there is a lot of research that says that people are most likely to respond and get involved to people they already know and trust, not to a stranger, not to some high profile star that comes along, but if the people that know and trust you, that you've got relationships with, those are the first people that you're going to be able to draw into being involved in things. In working with people, you want to follow up often with them. Keep in contact with people. Don't let them have the chance of drifting away. I think often in community work, we look for friendly settings around the kitchen table over a pot of coffee. Maybe if there's a lot of children in the families that are involved and the weather allows, it's in a park where the children can be playing nearby. But we try to make it easy for people to come together at the beginning, especially, and getting to know each other. The idea of each one invites one is a good principle to work with. We don't put a lot of pressure on. We've got to get a big crowd out, but each one invites one. I often encourage, when you're having an early meeting around an issue you're organizing around, set the room up with 10 or 12 chairs, not rows of 50 of them. It's way better to pull out more chairs because you need them when too many people show up than to have people thinking, oh boy, this is not a cause that enjoys much support. And then I just want to remind you about the power of community connectors. Sometimes we're tempted to go first to the people that are the formal leaders or that seem to be in positions of importance. But really, when we look around and we watch the life in a community, the people we're looking for are the people that connect with each other. And often they're people that might not have formal titles or positions. And I'm just running through all of these quickly, more as a kind of a reminder. And if you're doing community work, you'd of course build a proper checklist that made sure you covered the issues that you needed to cover. But you want to think about the people that are part of the community you're involved with, and what days and times work for them. Are there a lot of people that work shift schedules? Are there a lot of children involved, and maybe while they're away at school, it's a better time for some of the people? So think about those kinds of issues. Think about how people are going to get to the gathering. Do you need to fund some bus tickets? Do you need to organize some carpools for people to pick each other up? To what extent will social media work with you? Do most of the people have access so that you can be doing some of your making arrangements through Twitter or Facebook or something like that? Think about what's available in the community for places where posters can be put up. Where are there local papers that you can use? Is there a local Facebook community notice board? What about flyers that are distributed? Are there existing local organizations that you could engage with? For example, is there a community league that already has done some community organizing? Are there students in a school that have to put in some volunteer time to be able to earn their credits for a high school course? Look for allies, and remember that allies don't have to be people that commit to 100% agree with you and that meet all your criteria. They're people that share some of your concern about the issue, the gap, or the problem that's involved, and that might be able to work with you around what you're doing. One of the things that I love in community organizing, and I know some people aren't quite such enthusiasts of it as I am, but I think one of the very best things is canvassing. When you go out and actually knock on people's doors and face to face invite them or share a little bit, because then it's two real people coming together. And sure, you'll get some rejections and maybe even once in a while some rudenesses, but mostly people, when they open their door to someone, are reasonably polite, and it's a very rich opportunity to make a connection with someone that might then be able to be drawn into something you're doing. And finally, I mean, even though I am an old man that grew up in a different age, I know that technology is allowing us to do community organizing in significant ways, and maybe Zoom really does work best. I was made aware of that this morning when I woke up feeling really sick and realized that, man, if this had to be an in-person event, I might be concerned about bringing my germs to you. So don't fail to look through and consider what you can do through technology as well. But do remember that community organizing is not about becoming a social media influencer. It's about really having people build relationships with each other around a cause that matters to you. And I guess the other big thing I would say about getting on with this work of community organizing is that it really does require our persistence. It can often be slow and maybe a little bit disappointing in the early going before too many people have been engaged. And reminding yourself of why you're doing it and what can happen if you stay with it is an important thing, because that's you'll get over the hill eventually in most cases, but it might be a little bit discouraging along the way. So that was kind of a quick hodgepodge of things about how we get people together. I want to talk for a few minutes now about, once we get people together, what how we work together, and how the assembling might go forward. So first of all, I think fundamental to all of it is making sure that there can be real sharing when we come together in any kind of meeting or gathering. We need to have some initial way to remind ourselves what we have in common. Sometimes there's much to be said for just an informal social time at the beginning, with some coffee and tea and biscuits, and a chance for people to just chat without necessarily getting on with the immediate task. People who are organizers need to make sure that time gets well used. That's when you can notice the people that might be a bit quieter, or might not know anybody, and that you want to ensure you start to draw them in. But your work is going to be better if everybody is involved in it. And that doesn't mean everybody has exactly the same amount of time that they take up in the meeting, but it means that everybody feels trusted, and that they matter to participate to the level that they're able. Um, Time is an important thing to think about when you're having meetings in community organizing, especially in our diverse world now, because um, the importance of things like starting on time, ending on time, and things like that vary with cultures. So as much as you can, know about the group of people you're working with, and you make your choices about how you'll approach the issue of time from that. It's good to have some kind of an agenda. It's good at the beginning of a time together, or even before people come, to let them know what you're hoping to get through, what the business of your time together it is. It's important to make sure that any time more than two of you gather together, somebody is keeping a record of it. Somebody's taking notes that you'll be able to use to build on later, or to go back and refer to. It's also important early on, in community organizing, for groups to decide, how are we going to make decisions? What kind of democracy are we going to practice here to come, to all agree that that's how we'll reach decisions. I think that when you get together to work on something, it's good to try, if you're in the role of kind of facilitating the meeting, it's good to be trying to make sure you have sort of a mix of concerns and a vision. We need to be reminded that there's something that has to change, but we also need to be reminded of what we want it to be like when that change happens. So we need a good balance of that. You might want to think about whether or not translation or interpretation of some sort is needed. Again, thinking about the diversity of people that we have in lots of our communities now. When there's a number of people, maybe you need some way to make sure everybody takes turns to talk, at least for part of the meeting, like the talking stick that's passed from person to person. Maybe a facilitator sometimes needs to find a way, without embarrassing, to encourage people that haven't shared much, because silence doesn't mean a lack of great ideas and valuable things to bring to the meeting. And if there's very many people, being able to break into smaller groups where more people have a chance to do more sharing is certainly important to remember and use it. At most meetings, it's good to have some supplies there, like a flip chart or some paper you can tape on a table where you can all work together and do some shared brainstorming or mind mapping, and that draws people in. Not everybody learns by just listening by verbal ways, and so other ways to participate are good as well. But with meetings, I guess all those little hints said and done, the thing that I always feel is most important when we're doing community organizing is that before a time together ends, you want to do something to get people more engaged than they were when they arrived. You want to find out something about interests or strengths of participants that wasn't known before. And if it's shared out loud, the chance that it'll be used and acted on by a person is much greater. So you're trying to draw them in to doing that kind of sharing. Watch for evidence of somebody that's getting bolder, or that's gone away and done some research since the last meeting. Encourage any evidence of people that are getting more engaged with the project or with the vision that you have. And that ties in with the importance of mentoring. If you see people that are really have lots of possibility, you want to make the time to find out how to help them grow. I like the idea of what you maybe know as the snowflake model of leadership. Find more and more ways to give people that are willing small bits of responsibility. It's never good to have one or two or three people holding too much in their hands. Somebody can be in charge of the refreshments for the next meeting. Somebody can be in charge of organizing our canvassing this week. They don't have to be big jobs, but that, many points of the snowflake as opposed to just one lump is an important way to develop leadership. And then I guess the other thing I would say, because you'll start getting some enthusiasm and ideas and energy in meetings as you talk about these things, is without discouraging people, make sure you all understand the value, the necessity really, of preparing and planning. Because when you rush off just with a lot of emotion because we care about this and we're going to do something, damn it, the chance of failure is greater, and that can hurt your cause and hurt your organization more than if you did take a few extra sessions to get together and make sure you did the planning. That's how you avoid both busy work, that doesn't have any real outcomes to it, and failures where you try to take on more or the wrong thing at the wrong time. So you're going to want to get commitments of people, get them signed up if you like, and also the last thing I might say about coming together to work in groups is never underestimate the importance of thank yous and reminders. Keep the contact going as you go along, time by time. So what you start with is what I like to call a mission statement. And the next slide is sort of a template of a mission statement, just a basic thing that early on you're going to want to develop as you work together in the community. And once you've developed it, you want to keep it always in view for everyone. It's something you want to be sure everyone understands, but even better than understanding, that everyone feels a personal commitment to, that they have aligned themselves with this. And usually it's good if it's just a sentence that basically says, we are organizing, who are the we, to what's the change we want to make together, through what activities, by when. So that's pretty simple, but it's good to talk about that long enough to make sure that you all understand it, care about it, that you all agree with it, and allow the time for going back and forth and working your way to something that you can agree. A mission statement is also important because it lets you measure your progress as you go along. And I want, just before I wrap up, I want to say one last thing, and that's about personal care. Over the years in doing community organizing, sadly, I have a lot of times seen what happens if we push people too hard, or we're too aggressive with what we do. So it can't be all work, work, work all the time. Fatigue is where you'll lose people. Guilt trips are where you'll lose people, whereas gratitude helps you to build stronger connections with things. And I always even like to remember the old folk singer Bob Boston, who used to have a song that said, "Just because you're changing the world, don't mean you can't have some fun." So that should also have its place in community organizing work. So let me go to the next slide, which is really in 5 statements what I've been saying for the last 25 minutes. And that is that you've done your work in community organizing if these 5 things are present. You've got a good story. You know why you have to act. You know what needs to be done. You've got strong relationships. The foundation of all collective action is those relationships. You've got a good structure of shared power, shared responsibility, and everybody knowing what they do and where they fit within the group. You've got a good strategy. You've got a compelling vision, and you've got realistic, clearly stated outcomes that describe what's going to change. You've done your good preparatory work and research. And finally, you are genuinely prepared to take action. You're not just rushing off, but the difference between going out and doing something and taking action is significant. So why does this all matter? Let me go to one more slide that reminds you that community developing, community organizing is because we want change. We're not satisfied as people in a community to be told what to do or to be ignored, but we want something to be different. And let me close with a last slide about where we all stand when it comes to community organizing. A wonderful quote by a man that I think we probably all know and have learned from over the years. We have the chance to be part of the problem or part of the solution. And I just leave you with the thought that community organizing is just about the richest tool we have to make sure that we are part of achieving solutions and not just being unhappy, being hurt, or being ignored. And so with that, I'll turn things over to my friend Vasant, who's going to talk about where some of that community work might sometimes end up in the area of doing advocacy around policy change. Vasant.
Vasant, you're muted. Sorry, you might have to start over.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jim. My name is Vasant Choi, and my presentation is on advocacy and policy making. Or how do you work with decision makers to develop the right policy? I'm originally from Kenya, by the way, and I worked with the Alberta government for 30 years after doing graduate studies, and I was director of policy before retirement. So much of what I'm going to talk about comes from that. Since retirement, I've been on board of various nonprofit organizations. Please note that whatever I present here does not necessarily reflect the view of any of those organizations. It comes from my past experience and research. Much of it is based on my website and on my research for a report my friend Ann Goldblatt and I had done. The policy process talks about government, but the process can also apply to private business if they have a similar structure. The presentation looks at it from a community organization's point of view. An organization that wants to see a change in government policy or practice, or lack of it, has become an issue in the community. So can I have the next slide, please? Now, in order to influence or collaborate, you have to research the issue that you want to take forward for resolution. You have to know precisely what the issue is and how it is affecting the citizens of your organization is helping. You should include specific living examples of people experiencing the problem, albeit anonymous cases, so that the problem is real and not just hypothetical. Also, try to collect statistics on how many people are affected by the current situation and in what way. This information will ensure that you are informed and focused when you take the issue forward to a decision maker. Now, in terms of solutions, if you bring with you some possible solutions to the problem, you will be able to influence the direction the decision maker will take to resolve the issue. Otherwise, the researchers may come up with a solution based on other priorities, and it may not fully resolve the problem from your community's perspective. Community organizations and frontline workers are often the catalyst to change a policy or practice because they see the adverse effects firsthand. Can we have the next slide, please? Don't all issues need policy change. One problem may be a result of staff. Just take this off because it's making noise. As I was saying, not all issues need policy change. One problem may be a result of staff practice of how they're delivering the service. Another problem may be a result of inadequate policy or lack of policy. It is therefore important to know where the issue belongs so you approach the right decision maker, because there are different people dealing with different things. Service gap is a missing policy. I'll start with the higher level and then go down to the lower level. Service gap is a missing policy or service necessary to meet a demand or a need that exists in the community. The decision to fill the gap lies in the hands of the elected political members and cabinet, but they generally consider input from the staff and from the community, and that's where you would come in. Policy is the set of guiding rules for a program legislated by the government to achieve specific outcomes. Policy broadly gives a mandate to the executive staff to deliver services to achieve goals set by the government. The policy will outline the what and the why. Policies are generally adopted by the minister or cabinet and occasionally by executive management if delegated down. Procedure is a fixed step-by-step sequence of activities or instructions that must be followed to implement the policy. Procedures are directed to the service delivery staff and sometimes may be general enough to give flexibility in making case-by-case decisions. Procedures contain the what, the how, the where, and the when. The procedures are always developed and adopted by senior management in policy area in consultation with the service delivery area. And lastly, practice is the habitual act of implementing the steps outlined in the procedure to deliver the policy. Although staff are generally trained in policy and procedures, delivery of service depends upon its interpretation by individual staff or the delivery branch and its supervisor. Thus, practice may vary somewhat from office to office. Show you the next slide, please. Now, what do you do, or who do you approach to effect a change? That's an important thing, that you have to know who to approach, because as I said earlier, each level that we talked about is a different person who is responsible for, or different division that's responsible for. So, who do you approach will depend upon whether it is a service gap, a policy inadequacy, an inflexible procedure, or a practice problem. You have to try to find out where the problem lies. That may be difficult unless you are very familiar with the program, but often an internal staff with whom you have an ongoing contact may be able to help you. But once you find out, you can determine what level of staff to approach. Generally, following is the level of assignment duties in the government of Alberta. And that's what the table shows. So again, starting from the high level to the low level. The high level, the service gap, in other words, there is a program or service missing. Generally, the people to contact and who are in charge are director, assistant deputy minister, minister, and the cabinet, because those are big issues. The next level is policy, specific to the program. Senior manager of policy, director, assistant deputy minister, deputy minister, and minister responsible for it. Procedure, manager, senior manager, director. Practice, supervisor or a manager in the office. Can we have the next slide, please? Now, the next question to ask yourself is, now you know who to approach. The next question is, who should approach? Who in your organization should approach the government contact? It's best to have a higher level person from your organization, such as the director, to make the approach if it is a higher level person from the government. So you have a sort of equivalent level, both in terms of knowledge. And for policy and service gaps issues, it is best for the director of the community organization to approach their counterpart. For procedure or practice issues, a frontline worker from the organization can take the lead in approaching a manager or a supervisor. Managers may be able to resolve a procedure issue without taking it further up the ladder. The best starting point is your regular contact person. It is always wise to develop an ongoing friendly connection with your counterpart in the government. Like Jim was saying, you have to have a friendly relationship, then you can approach them again and again. If the contact person you approach to make a change does not have the authority to make the change, they will take it up to the person who has the authority. The minister has the authority to change any service gap and major policy change, although the director or deputy minister can be your first contact. In other words, you don't have to go straight to the minister, you can go through the senior management. However, a practice or procedure issue can be resolved at a lower level, and approaching a higher level may in fact not get any attention because they've got other things to deal with. If your first contact is or unwilling to deal with the issue, then you can move it up a notch to a higher authority level. Sometimes an issue falls into two ministries, in which case you may have to approach both ministries. I just to go back a second, where I talked about the policy, the practice issue. We had one example that I'll give you. There was one district office which was refusing assistance to a young woman who was getting off the street and wanted to go to school and change her life. But she would not be allowed, because she had to get out of the shelter, she would not be allowed into a government subsidized community housing, because that particular district office had a policy that they would not allow anybody who has been on the street. But the problem we ran into is catch-22. She cannot get out of the shelter, change her life, go to school. She could not get the subsidized housing because if she gave up the street life, she would not be able to afford a rental place. So what we suggested to this community group was to go and meet with the manager of the district office and explain the situation. And also, if you do your homework, you know that all the other district offices don't discriminate in the same manner. So it's a practice, not a procedure or a policy. And they understood, they changed the practice. So sometimes it's easy to approach them and get that done. Okay, I'll continue with where I was now. Now, if the ministerial committee that meets regularly, you may want to approach the chair who can invite you to a meeting and put your issue on the agenda. In that case, it is important that you do your research on the issue and possible solutions and prepare a paper or a visual presentation. You may even be able to take with you a citizen who is experiencing the issue firsthand. Now, if there are other organizations that are dealing with similar issues, probably it is best to collaborate with them and approach the government jointly. You get support and greater credibility, especially with issues at the policy level. Now, we'll have the next slide, please. Now, what is the best approach to effect a change? There are different approaches to effect a change, and which approach you take will depend upon the circumstances. At one end, there is collaborate, that is work with the decision maker to develop a solution, or at the other end is go public, that is raise the issue in public through a petition or a demonstration or a rally. Sometimes you need that, going to public. Sometimes you need collaborate. Sometimes you shift between the two, depending on the situation. The Japanese Readers Agreement presentation that was done a couple of days ago talked about how they had to shift and get the public behind them as well. So now, you have to decide which you're going to settle on. Really, I found from my experience working from inside was collaboration can be a good starting point. Generally, collaboration is more effective when it is a non-controversial issue and all sides can agree to a solution. Procedure, practice, and even minor policy issues generally fall into this category. Even big policy issues may fall into this category and can be solved through collaboration with the minister, for example, or your elected official. For example, a prominent community organization, and I'll give you an example where I was involved through Public Interest Alberta. I was vice president of Public Interest Alberta then. Now, for a prominent community organization, that's my organization in Alberta, and other organizations of similar nature were against the government through collaboration to increase the minimum wage incrementally from $10.20 in 2015 to $15 in 2018. There was a lot of background work being done on this, meeting the minister, convincing the minister that this is necessary, otherwise the people are not making ends meet and they're ending up on income support. And that's costing the government instead of the employer paying the adequate wage. We tried for the living wage, but we ended up with $15. $18 was the living wage then. And as I said, we can improve it incrementally. A major policy issue or service gap issue that needs a major shift in direction or involves a significant cost may be difficult to resolve. Solutions may be controversial and may not be in line with the government's priority. With collaboration and compromise, both may be able to come to a resolution. But after all that, if a solution cannot be agreed upon, you will have to decide if raising the issue in public and soliciting public support is the best way. Currently, we are going through a couple of such examples. At another session of this convention, as I said earlier, at another session of this convention a couple of days ago, Arthur Kazumi Miki and Marika Omazu made a presentation about the strategy they used to arrive at the Japanese-Canadian redress agreement with the federal government. They worked patiently and persistently over the years. It took them 8 years with high-level political leaders. It was a new initiative and there was no precedent. Public support was necessary in order to succeed because the Japanese-Canadian population was quite small. Both Arthur and Marika have written books on the issue, and I would suggest that their books give a good insight into the strategy they used. So on such big issues that are going public, it's good to read those two books because they will give you a good insight into the strategy they used and how successful they were. Can we go to the next slide then, please? Now, how decisions are made in the government, that's an important thing to know too. We talked about at what level decisions are made according to the level of authority delegated to them. Some policy decisions are delegated to only senior management staff of the ministry. However, on all policy matters, the departmental staff at headquarters play a significant role in researching the issue and the solutions, the extent of the problem and the impacts of the solution. The senior management, their proposal up the line to the minister. So what that means is that even if it's a high policy level issue, it's good to keep in contact with the researchers, with the planners, with the policy advisors, etc., and keep in touch with them, keep them updated on what you're doing, and they will develop some of these papers that internally move the issue up. Departmental staff often have the authority to make decisions on how to deliver a service, as we said earlier, through procedures, standards, and forms. For example, practice or method of delivery is generally a decision made in the regions or at the local delivery office, like we talked about the case that I cited. Now, decisions with the greatest impact rise to the highest level. Decision with the greatest impact rise to the highest level and to the minister mandated for that ministry by the premier. In addition to consulting with the senior staff, the minister may consult with caucus and the colleagues, and sometimes with community leaders on potentially controversial issue, on big policy decision or a decision that will incur major cost or a big shift in existing program. The minister takes it to the cabinet and the premier, and they jointly discuss and say, should we move on this or not? And how do we approach it? Now, most policy decisions require an act or a regulation passed by the legislature. So they become open for debate with all the MLAs, including the opposition MLAs. And you might want to also educate the opposition MLAs, so when it comes from the floor, they can present the case that you are trying to present. However, there are some decisions that require only the minister's authority to come into effect, such as a change in benefit rate in the program, for example, income support benefit rates. And they do not require a passage by the legislature, in which case you want to approach the senior staff in the department or the minister if you want to make a change. So, for example, we went to the Minister of Social Services when we wanted to pressure the minister for increasing the income support and age benefits. And we prepared, like I said, a research document and brought to them, and also showed them that no benefit increase had occurred for a number of years, but the cost of living had gone up. So you have to prepare, do your homework, and convince the minister. And also, of course, the minister's concerns are budgetary costs, and you have to explain or not explain, but identify to the minister that the cost that you're going to see an increase will be less than if these people were to stay on the street or were to become homeless or if their families, their children needed assistance on a long-term basis. Now, all big decisions are influenced by party priorities, business community, unions, advocacy groups, users of the service, news media, and the general public opinion. So, community organizations may want to form an alliance with some of them to influence the change. And that goes back to what Jim was talking about. Okay, we'll go to the next slide then. Now, community organizations like yours make the most headway if they build a strong case with research in their pocket, if they base their arguments on evidence and experience, if they come jointly with other similar organizations, if they collaborate with the right staff. Because remember, in government, the staff are not the same. All staff are not the same. There are a lot of people who are sympathetic and empathetic to the issues that you are facing and what you are seeing out in the community. And if the community organization gets support from a recognized and respected community leader. So on one issue, we got actually a famous businessman because he supported what we were asking for. And his support was quite important because he was respected in the community. And if the organization uses the right timing or the window of opportunity, because sometimes it's not the right time and you won't succeed no matter how hard you try, but sometimes an opportunity arises because something happened in the community, it hit the news media, became a big issue, and everybody is now mobilized in the community. And here is your opportunity to take that issue, you've done the work, go and take it through the open window. So be prepared for the window to open. We'll go to the next slide, please. Now, this diagram, schematic, basically talks about, shows the decision cycle in the government. Generally, the best time for a change is the first 2 years of the government mandate. The last year before the election is a red zone, especially for a potentially controversial change. So you won't succeed. But in the first 2 years, you will be able to do quite a bit. It is also important to connect with the decision maker and the staff at the right time in the budget cycle. So the yearly budget cycle runs from April to March. However, the budget allocation and decision process starts in the fall. Although the new budget comes in April, in fall, they start making decisions about how they're going to spend, what they're going to do, how much funding they need, etc. Thus, that may be the right time to influence the process. And an actual collaboration actually for a community organization should start even earlier than the fall to allow for research and consultation time. We'll go to the next slide. Now, minister directs their staff to prepare a briefing note on the issue and policy options once the minister has accepted that he or she would like to do something about it. The briefing note includes the issue, the solution options, and the impacts of each. The impact section includes the cost implication, legislation and policy change, impact on clients, both positive and negative, and the anticipated reception by the community at large. It would help the case if the community organization included these factors in their presentation document. So if you go and meet the minister or a senior management in the department, prepare a document, written document that you leave behind, and your contact phone number and email address. Leave this document with them, but prepare what they prepare. So you already have in. Of course, you won't know the cost implication, but you will know whether it's going to be a major or a small cost implication. They do the calculation. Okay, we'll go to the next slide then, the last one. In any case, community organizations should not expect a quick decision or turnaround, as decisions have to go through many steps before approval, as we talked earlier. Also, they should not expect the whole solution or everything they asked for, and they should be prepared for a partial solution, which can be improved incrementally over time through further collaboration. That brings me to the end of my talk, and like Jim said, we are open for question and answer. So I don't know how the question and answer works. I assume you write the question in the chat box, and either Jim or I can answer them. My screen disappeared, and it says Vasant's MacBook Air. Okay. Now, Jim is there. Hi, Jim.
Yeah. Vasant, there was one comment put into the chat already that I might say something about, and then you may as well have some thoughts. Carrie said, how do community organizations advocate for policy if they are being funded by the ones who make policy without jeopardizing their funding? And this is something I've struggled with quite a bit through the years, Carrie. And I'll offer two thoughts about it, and Vasant may have some others. But when I was the senior staff person at Mennonite Centre for Newcomers for a number of years, for example, we were very open, even though almost the entirety of our funding came from different orders of government. We never hesitated to often hold news conferences or in other ways express publicly concerns we had about policies and legislation and funding allocations and so on. And my experience was that almost never were there negative consequences to that. So I part of me wants to say that might be an overblown concern, but I also have had some experiences where I know that there has been punishment, if you like. So I don't say it's entirely unimportant and that you can ignore that idea, but I think we can often as community organizations be somewhat critical and find that if we're doing a good job with the resources we get, government will still fund programs that we deliver. But the other and maybe the more important thing I want to say is that a lot of times if community organizations come together in umbrella organizations or coalitions, like the Edmonton Coalition on Housing and Homelessness is, I think, a very good example, or in more recent years, Public Interest Alberta, these kind of organizations can have organizational members, but when the organization speaks, when the coalition speaks, it speaks as itself. And so the involvement and the participation of other organizations isn't quite as evident, and often that then, ECHO now often speaks on issues of housing security, and says things that many of our member organizations probably wouldn't say, to be honest. So there's a couple of thoughts from me about that question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks, Jim. I agree that the concern or the fear about public funding being affected because they're making advocacy. Advocacy usually on the inside may irritate people, but advocacy or collaboration or consulting, this thing can be affected, but the fear is overblown with you. I am one of those people who is overcautious very often. However, I would say that there are two places where the effect can come. One is that if you are getting funding from AGLC, that's the provincial government's AGLC, the gambling money, casino money. If you are getting that, then they've got one of the restrictions that says that funds from them will not be used for advocacy. Now, it depends upon what the definition they use for advocacy. I mean, obviously, if you're speaking about the poor people and or about the homeless people, then obviously you're going to speak about them. you're going to take action. That's your mandate. That's your reason for existence. But it's best to keep in touch with them and find out what they mean by that. And can you do this? Can you not do that? I actually, when I step out of this organization where I'm now president, I'm president of Canadians for Civil Society. But when I step out, I'm going to follow up with the AGLC and argue with them that a lot of these organizations are constrained, their hands are tied because they're getting funding from you, but they cannot do what they're mandated to do, what they've set out to do. The second place that you have to worry about is if you have with the taxation CRA, and if they have allowed you to be recognized you as a non-profit organization, a charity organization, so you can issue receipt for the people who give you donations. They also have restrictions, and their restriction is that you can use up to 10% of the funds for the purpose of advocacy. So again, you run into that kind of difficulty. However, there was a case taken by a few community organizations to the federal in court against Harper's government, and they won the case that they were doing what they were supposed to be doing. Anyway, Jim, you wanted to make a comment on that, and then I'll continue.
No, I was just going to highlight. It's a small thing, but the CRA regulation is you can only use 10% of the money that you have for which you issue tax receipts. So if you are like a $10 million organization and only 500,000 of your money came from tax receipted donations, you're restricted. You can't, for advocacy, you can't use more than 10% of that money, but you could use, there's no limits on what you could use of other funds, provided they were available to use for that purpose.
Yeah. And you have to keep account of the two funds. The other thing I was going to say is that if you are going to demonstrate in public, hold big rally, and that kind of stuff is more visible and is more controversial. So if any of these organizations that you're worried about are going to act, they're more likely to because it's at that level. But if you go and approach a minister or approach a senior governmental staff, senior management to discuss, that becomes not really an advocacy and pushing, it becomes more like a collaboration. And that's the reason why I keep using that word. And what you're doing there is basically convincing, first of all, telling them what exists out there in the community, what the problems are, and then convincing them that we need to take action on it and what kind of action we need to take. So I find that one is much safer and you don't have to fear. But when you do public demonstration, that's where you might get into question.
Vasant, there's another one here. Guyan asked, what are some strategies we can use to connect folks in our communities? And again, if you're okay, maybe since that was kind of my focus, I'll just start that off and let you come in. I strongly believe that the best overall strategy is when people connect with each other. All the suspicions and the assumptions that we make about each other start to be eroded when we're face to face, when we're really together. And so in the kind of hodgepodge of suggestions I made when I was speaking a few minutes ago, you probably noticed almost all of them start with one way or another finding a way to get more than two people together in a room where they can talk to each other, where they can listen to each other. If you're an organizer, one of the best skills you can have, I think, is to really know how to use open questions well, so that when you get those people who might be nervous or only mildly interested, or even a feeling might still be bringing some feelings of hostility or suspicion, you know how to engage the conversation in ways that will get people starting to find, what do we have in common? What do we share a concern about, or what do we share a vision for? And that really, that's how people start to connect. Once they discover that, oh, there's something about you that also matters to me, or that's similar to how I look at the world, then their own relationship has a way better chance of starting to develop. So I would say, as a start, the key strategy is to know how to have people able to talk and listen with each other, so they discover the beauty and the wonder of us all being interconnected. We're all relations.
Yeah, yeah, I agree totally, Jim. The only thing I would like to add is that you should have this kind of connections with other similar organizations, not only when the issue arises, but on an ongoing basis. You're kind of talking like buddies all the time. If you get a couple of minutes, you pick up the phone and say, "Hey, Jim, how is things going? And by the way, I experienced this thing." You see, you're constantly in touch with each other. Okay, that was good. Is there any other question that?
There's one that says, what's the starting point for inter-organizational collaboration? And then it goes on, an issue is identified by an outsider who does the research and has gathered stakeholder solution maker support. However, at the moment, the issue is not a priority for organizations. However, those who can affect change, are asking the outsider to gather support from organizations to affect the change.
So the question is, where is the starting point for
inter-organizational collaboration?
Yeah. Do you want to answer that first, Jim, or?
Well, what I can observe is that, in my experience with building quite a few, or being part of the creation of a number of coalitions or collaborations over the years, I think in almost all those cases, there was at least one or two people from a couple of organizations that did think it mattered, and that we needed a broader involvement of other organizations. I think I don't want to be negative, but I think it might be tough for a complete outsider that cared passionately about an issue if they didn't find at least one organization that also shared their care. Because, like Vasant, what you were just saying about staying in touch with each other, senior people in organizations are talking back and forth all the time. So if I really care about what's happening about temporary foreign workers, and I'm at Mennonite Centre, I'm going to be chatting with my colleagues at other immigrant serving organizations, and we might eventually say, we should get together and see if there's a need for a bit of a coalition around this issue. So, yeah, I think if you didn't find an ally in one organization, just an outside voice might struggle to be able to see a coalition build. But I'm not saying it can't be done, and there may be other ideas that some of you have.
Mm-hmm. Well, I just to add to what you said, Jim, as a person, one habit one should form if you're in a community organization, especially at a director level or something. What you should be doing is that attending a lot of conferences, meetings, rallies, social functions, etc., so that you can meet other people. And that's where you start developing it's a relaxed, informal situation. And you can form friends with other people, exchange email and phone number and so on. And you know what their interests are and what your interests are. So that when you do come up with an issue that you want to deal with and you need another organization to work with you, you know who to go for. You pick up the phone and you go to that person. You already developed that, rather than waiting when that happens and you start struggling and looking for somewhere. Go to these functions and social gatherings. Network. Okay. I think I don't see any more. Somebody will implement my network is big. Okay, that's good. I don't see any other question on the margin. Do you, Jim?
No.
Okay. Did you want to make any other comments that? I think Emily Moore is sharing a Mentimeter. Okay. That's the evaluation team of the convention. Somebody has asked here, Vasant, how do you invite one work with you work? I don't get it. You mean, how do you invite one to work with you? Is that what the question is, Westin? If I understand the question correctly, I think, how do you invite somebody to work? So if it's, let's say I am in charge of one organization, like I am with Canadians for Civil Society now, and I want to invite another organization to come and work with us. The best thing is if I have made, like I said earlier, an ongoing contact, I just go and connect up with the person. In volunteer work, I always get my friends to come up and help. How does that work? Okay. If you are in a, what you are raising is that when you have got some social function, something that's organized, people are there to help, come and help you. But in a policy level, you'll have a smaller population to work with. So what you have to do is you have to identify, network with them, and keep a contact with them. So when you come to a situation where you need either the help or the support, then you just pick up and talk to them. Sometimes that organization may have some other issue that they're dealing with and they don't have time or resources to help with this. Then you may have to wait or strategize or get another organization to work with you. But you find that this, if you bring a few organizations together to work on something, it is much more effective, both in terms of the crowd that you have, and number two, the ideas that they bring, strategies, how to approach, etc. And sometimes you may not have a contact with somebody internal that makes a decision, but somebody in the other organization may have. So, and on policy level, again, like I said, you have a lesser number of people. If you've networked over the years with people, then you will know who to phone and who to contact. Like if I sometimes need some advice on something, particularly to do with the community level and who is the person I should be talking to or contact and so on, I phoned Jim and said, Jim, can you connect me up with somebody? Because Jim knows hundreds of people out there in the community, which I don't. But if there is somebody in the government that somebody wants to contact with, then I can connect up with the people that I used to work with or the people that followed up.
One, since we've got a couple of minutes, I want to just mention one thing that isn't exactly directly related to the questions, but I'm currently part of, in Edmonton, the Edmonton Intercultural Centre, which is an organization that took over the operation of what used to be Macaulay School, and it has 13 different organizations that are tenants in that building. And I really love the idea that when you have an actual physical building where a whole bunch of organizations that all share a commitment to the power of community, that all have visions of a better kind of a city, are carrying out their day-to-day work. Really neat informal connectings can happen all the time, in the hallways and so on. And I've seen that model work as well in Saskatoon and in Calgary. and I wish we had that there were more of them. I think there are in Edmonton other buildings where that kind of thing happens, and there's some real possibilities that arise when you don't have to just come together once in a while for an organized period of time, but you're informally day by day in contact with each other. The chance of being able to find strengths that you can share with each other and achieve a lot more than any of you might have done on your own are great. And I think all of us that are involved with organizations should give serious consideration to possibilities for more of those kinds of centers to be created.
Mm-hmm. I just see, by the way, a comment that Wesleyan has made about university researchers helping with doing your research and preparing for issues. That reminds me of something we were planning, as a matter of fact, tomorrow evening, but that won't happen tomorrow evening because the Chief Justice could not come. We are holding a reception. Now it's going to be on February 9th next year. And that reception will be at the university. And we, the University of Alberta and Canadians for Civil Society, are jointly organizing the reception, inviting a federal Supreme Court Justice, Justice Martin, Sheila Martin, to come over and be the keynote speaker and talk about human rights, the UN Declaration and the Charter, and the human rights and how to enforce a civil society and the issues related to that. And of course, she'll be talking about on the basis of the cases that they go through the legal system. But it will be interesting. And by the way, it will be free, and we're going to have a reception, which means there will be, at the end, you'll be able to meet Justice Martin, and there'll be finger food, and you'll be able to talk to a number of other people from the university as well as from the community and network with them at the end after the main speech is done, and question and answer with the justice. So, and how will you know about it? Well, we are going to put it, I think Ignite is going to put it on the website, that contact. And we will also be putting it on the university website, Canadians for Civil Society website, etc. We'll be kind of spreading out the news. So anybody can register for it once we put it out, and please come. We've got room for, I think, approximately 350 to 400 people. And we will also broadcast live on, just like this one, through the internet. So people will be able to watch from out of Edmonton as well.